Son replaced me with his dad's new wife, Mom 2.0. But when I spent his college fund on a house, suddenly he remembers who his real mom is. I, 42F, have a 19-year-old son, Ryan, who's supposed to start college in a couple of months. I'm also in the middle of a divorce from my husband of 18 years, Eric, 43M. He had an affair with his assistant, Natalie, 32F, which had been going on for almost a year before he finally admitted it to me a couple of months ago. As soon as he told me, I filed for divorce and moved out of our house. Since then, I've been living with my sister. Naturally, I expected Ryan to take my side in all this, as I'm clearly the one who's been wronged. But, to my surprise, he chose to side with his father. I tried reaching out to him about a week after moving out, as he hadn't contacted me, not even to ask where I was. He hadn't been home the day Eric confessed his affair, so I didn't get a chance to say goodbye. I waited nearly a week for Ryan to reach out, but that call or text never came. Finally, I texted him and told him I was leaving his father because of the affair. His response shocked me. He said he already knew but didn't care much because it didn't involve him. I found this response odd and started to think that letting Eric speak to him first had been a mistake. Eric had the chance to control the narrative and potentially spin whatever version of events suited him. I tried multiple times to set the record straight, but it turned out that Eric had actually told Ryan the truth. Despite that, Ryan still chose his father's side. I couldn't wrap my head around it, but he's my son, so I kept trying. I made every effort to reconnect with him, even while juggling my job and the divorce. He would agree to meet me on occasion, but his enthusiasm was minimal at best. He was often distracted, glued to his phone during our time together, and it hurt me deeply. Over the past few weeks, he completely stopped responding to my texts and began ignoring me entirely. Then, about a week ago, I saw a post on his Instagram that left me shattered. In the post, Ryan was smiling next to Natalie, and the caption referred to her as Mom 2.0 with a heart emoji. That post was my breaking point. Losing Eric was already devastating, but now it felt like I was losing my son to the same woman who had wrecked my marriage. I snapped. I called Ryan, but when he didn't answer, I lost control and called him 15 more times until he finally picked up. He sounded irritated, but I didn't care. I demanded an explanation for the post and the caption. He coldly told me that it was none of my business and accused me of spying on him. That accusation floored me. His account is public, and I follow him because I'm his biological mother. I told Ryan that it was incredibly low and hurtful of him to take Eric's side, even though he had cheated on me. Now, Ryan was also pretending that the other woman was part of his family, all while ignoring the woman who had actually given birth to him and raised him. Ryan coldly replied that he owed me nothing and, if I was so upset, he just blocked me so I couldn't see any more of his posts. He told me that what had happened was in the past and that, instead of whining, I should focus on building my future, just like he was trying to build his new family connections. Then, he hung up and actually blocked me. It was a huge shock. Ryan and I, like any other parent-child duo, had our disagreements, but I never expected him to betray me like this. Growing up, we were very close. It was only in the last couple of years that he started growing closer to Eric than to me, but I always believed he loved us equally. That phone call shattered that belief. I cried for nearly an hour after he blocked me. I couldn't believe my son would do this to me. But once I was done crying, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let people walk all over me while I wallowed in sadness for the rest of my life. I decided to take Ryan's advice and do something bold. I had saved a significant amount of money for Ryan's college fund. Eric and I had agreed to split the cost of his tuition, and we both set aside money in separate accounts for that purpose. That money was supposed to remain untouched, but I thought, screw it. For years, I'd had my eye on a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood, but I never bought it. Eric had refused to move, and Ryan insisted on staying in our old neighborhood because his friends lived nearby. Now that I realized Ryan had no gratitude toward me, it became clear. I didn't need to keep prioritizing him over myself. I contacted the real estate agent handling the house and offered them the entire college fund, and a little extra, to buy it. I got the deal. I'm supposed to move in by the end of the month. Feeling a surge of empowerment, I decided to post a picture of the house on social media to show everyone that I wasn't sitting at home crying over things I couldn't control anymore. After I posted it, one of Eric's relatives must have sent it to him. A few days later, he texted me, asking how I managed to afford that house since it had been out of my budget when we'd last discussed it. I didn't care what he thought, so I told him the truth. I'd spent Ryan's college fund on the house and didn't regret it. Eric flipped out. He started yelling, calling me irresponsible and accusing me of being petty and jealous just because Ryan was getting along with Natalie. He even accused me of punishing Ryan for siding with him instead of me. But none of that was true. I did this because, for once, I felt like I deserved it. I no longer needed to chase after my son. He had other people looking out for him, and his actions made it clear that he preferred them over me. So, he didn't need me anymore. And if he didn't need me, then I assumed he didn't need my money either. Eric couldn't argue with that, so I disconnected the call. But it wasn't over yet. About an hour later, Ryan called me. He was devastated, sobbing so hard that I could barely understand what he was saying. Through his tears, he kept asking how I could do this to him when he'd always put me first and above everybody else. It was petty, but I couldn't resist asking him if he had been putting me first when he blocked me, just because I'd been upset about him calling Natalie Mom 2.0. He tried to explain that the post meant nothing. Ryan said it was just a kind gesture to make Natalie feel more comfortable as part of the family because, regardless of the past, Eric wanted a future with her. Ryan claimed he only wanted to balance his old family and his new one without losing either. He added that he hadn't expected me to turn so hostile toward him. I told him I could say the same about him. After all, he had turned his back on me first, even though I was the victim, the one who had been cheated on. Ryan just kept crying. Between his sobs, he said he never expected his own mother to take revenge on him like this. His words started to make me feel awful, especially when he began hiccuping, a habit he's had since childhood whenever he's truly upset. I hadn't heard him do that in years, and it crushed me. Eventually, he apologized. He said he was very sorry for everything he had done, for what it was worth, and then hung up. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. I'm not sure if what I did was out of line or not. Update 1. Hi, everyone. I moved into my new house recently, and it's been a few days since I've been living here. I brought back everything I'd paid for from the old house. When I went to get my things, I ran into Eric, Natalie, and Ryan. They're all living together now. That's nice for Eric, I suppose. He managed to replace me as soon as I left. Actually, to be precise, he already had Natalie lined up before I left, which is why we're divorced. Eric and Natalie ignored me the entire time I was there. That wasn't really a punishment for me. It actually made things easier. I was able to instruct the movers and get everything done faster without their interference. Ryan, however, tried to stop me before I left. He hadn't interrupted me while I was packing, and I hadn't tried to speak to him either. I figured there was nothing left to say, especially after everything that had happened. But just as I was about to get into my car, he stopped me and asked if I'd given any thought to how I was going to contribute to his college fund now. There was no apology, no sign of regret. I didn't bother to answer him. I just got in the car and drove away. Over the past few days, I've been thinking a lot about Ryan's behavior. We had grown a little distant in the last couple of years, but I thought that was normal, just the growing pains of raising a teenager. I never imagined it would come to this. So, he couldn't get along with me even if he wanted to, but he had stayed on good terms with his father throughout. That made me feel a little alienated, though I never held it against him. This, however, was different. This was a situation where I genuinely needed him to stand up for me, but he didn't. I guess I was really disappointed. It was bad enough that he didn't take my side, knowing his mother had been cheated on, but the way he treated me afterward hurt even more. I don't think anyone could tolerate that degree of disrespect, regardless of who it came from. And it's not like Ryan is a child. He's an adult. He knew exactly what he was doing. Update 2. Like I said in my previous update, I can't forgive my son, and the money is already spent. I don't see the point of him bothering me every other day, but Ryan seems determined to keep texting me, asking if I've changed my mind. I've been ignoring him for the past couple of days, but after almost a week, he's still at it. So, today, I decided to finally respond. I told him that the money was gone, and there was nothing I could do to bring it back. Besides, he'd already made his priorities clear to me, so it felt unfair for him to treat me poorly and still expect me to pay for his college. I suggested that the person he referred to as Mom 2.0 could contribute to his college fund instead, which seemed more reasonable. Ryan got annoyed and texted back, saying it was just a post, and that I didn't need to get so triggered over it. But to me, it wasn't just a post. It felt like a slap in the face. Not only had Eric chosen Natalie over me, but now it seemed like my own son was taking their side. Ryan is old enough to know right from wrong, so I couldn't understand why he'd chosen their side over mine. The only explanations I could come up with were, he didn't even think they'd done anything wrong, which would be a terrible reflection of his morals. He knew something I didn't. Maybe they were doing something for him that I couldn't. Either way, he wasn't on my side and didn't have my back, which was a huge heartbreak for me. I told Ryan all of this in a long, emotional text. His only response was that I needed to get over it. I was so exasperated that I muted all notifications from him and archived our chat. I couldn't bring myself to block him because he's still my son, but if he decides to test my patience again, I just might do it. Update 3. It's been 2 weeks since I last spoke to my son. Today, Eric and Ryan decided to ambush me at my office. I was about to leave for lunch when I saw Eric's car parked across the street. Both of them were leaning against it, waiting for me. I decided to ignore them and walked past, but they followed me. They told me I needed to talk to them and explain my actions. After so many explanations, I couldn't fathom what they were still confused about. I told them to go away, but, like most times, that didn't work. Ryan started sulking and said that, if not Eric, I definitely owed him an explanation. So, I decided to just get it over with once and for all. I told them to follow me into the nearest restaurant. Once we were seated, I began talking without giving them a chance to interrupt. I wasn't interested in their side of the story at all. I told them that, despite being together for almost 18 years, Eric and I were getting a divorce because he cheated on me. Instead of showing any empathy, Ryan had chosen to side with his father's affair partner and do everything in his power to make me feel worse about myself, as if the divorce and the betrayal weren't bad enough. I told Ryan, to his face, that after everything that had happened, I couldn't think of him as the son I'd raised. If he truly was my son, he would never have done or said the things he had. It was disgusting to the core, and I didn't want to associate with any of them anymore. I told them they were all immoral, unethical, and just disgusting people in general. I addressed Ryan in particular, saying that I was still giving him a chance because he was my son. But, had a stronger and more ruthless parent been in my place, they would have cut him off completely after that Instagram post. Ryan was lucky to even have a chance to talk to me because most people wouldn't have given him that opportunity. When I was done, I could see tears welling up in Ryan's eyes. I just knew he was about to start crying. Not wanting to appear weak, I hurriedly grabbed my sandwich, paid for it, and left. I'd said a lot, but it was still really hard for me to watch him cry. I didn't want to say another word or let him see me falter, so I just walked out. Neither of them has contacted me since then, and I doubt they will. Even if they do, it's unlikely to be about the college fund anymore. I think I've made it very clear why that money is gone, so there shouldn't be any more questions about it. I still have to meet Eric in a couple of days for negotiations, so I know I'll have to see him again. But I don't know what will happen to my relationship with Ryan after this. He seemed deeply upset, and I know the things I said today hit him hard. Update 4. It's been a month since I last saw my son, and I honestly thought I'd never see him again. It was heartbreaking, but I'd made my peace with it. There wasn't much else I could do at this point. Eric has also stopped arguing with me during negotiations. I suspect what I said at the restaurant may have gotten to him as well. When Eric first told me about Natalie, I didn't scream or cause a scene. I just left quietly and never looked back. Maybe the guilt hadn't fully hit him because I didn't express my anger and disappointment until that day at the restaurant. As for Ryan, we didn't speak for an entire month. I truly believed I'd never see him again. He's supposed to start college in a couple of weeks, and I kept going through old photo albums of us from when he was little. It broke my heart to think I wouldn't be there to see him off when he left for college. I kept imagining how it would be Natalie instead of me seeing Ryan off, and the thought made me deeply upset. But there was nothing I could do about it. 3 days ago, I received an email from Ryan. It was deeply emotional. He apologized for the way he had treated me and explained the real reason he had been so kind to Natalie. Eric had promised him a car if he treated Natalie better and agreed to let him get an apartment with his friends in his second year. Ryan admitted he didn't know how to do this without hurting me. He explained that if he stayed on good terms with me, I'd inevitably ask about his relationship with Natalie, and he didn't want to face that. So, he started pushing me away, hoping he could reconnect with me once he got what he wanted. In the email, Ryan said he now realized none of it was worth losing our relationship. He regretted everything he had done and asked if I would be there to see him off when he started college. He even provided the dates and details. I haven't made up my mind about whether I want to go. At the end of the day, he hurt me for a car and the promise of fun with his friends. While I understand the temptation, since I was his age once too, I would never have hurt my loved ones for something so trivial. His actions were intentional and hurtful, and they were for a petty reason. But at least he apologized, which is something. I haven't responded to his email yet because I'm still trying to decide what to do. I miss him terribly and wish we could go back to the way things were. Or at least try to. Update 5. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for following my story and for all the comments and messages I've received. They mean the world to me. It's comforting to know that so many people can relate to my experience. Ryan and I have finally started working on our relationship. He's leaving for college in a couple of days, and I finally responded to his email yesterday. I told him how awful he had made me feel, like I'd failed as a parent. I explained that it would take me some time to come around, but I also told him I couldn't keep him away from me anymore. He's my only child. People might think of me as weak or a pushover, but I've decided there's been enough punishment and revenge in this family. I can't live with so much bitterness in my heart. I'm choosing to mend things not out of duty or obligation, but because I want to. I admitted that if he weren't my son, I might not be able to forgive him. But he is my son, and I love him. Just this once, I'll look past what he did. As long as he promises never to repeat this behavior, not just with me, but with anyone who loves him. After sending my response, we hopped on a phone call and had an honest conversation about everything. By the end of it, we were both crying, which turned out to be a much-needed emotional release. Ryan promised he'd never act like that again and said there was nothing in the world he wanted more than to repair our relationship. We've decided to try online therapy sessions together because we've clearly been through a lot. I don't think we can fully heal without professional help. Ryan also told me that he asked Eric to stay back because he wants me to drive him to his college campus and help him settle in. He said it would give us time to talk before he leaves. Eric and Natalie were disappointed that he didn't want them tagging along, but Ryan was firm about who he wanted to take him.